True Crime Conversations acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast was recorded on. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in the Canadian city of Toronto. Heather was straightening up her downtown condo, just starting her day. It was another busy one. She's a real estate broker, always on the move. This morning's task was a simple one. Finally get those kitchen cabinets fixed. The hinges had been loose for weeks, and the building manager had recommended someone, a handyman named Jace. Right on time, there was a knock at the door. Heather opened it to find a man in his early 40s, relaxed, athletic, tool bag in hand. He had that kind of calm, casual confidence that immediately puts people at ease. He introduced himself with a smile that seemed to land exactly where it was meant to. Heather let him in, grateful to have one less thing to worry about on her to-do list. As he worked, they chatted. Small stuff, favourite neighbourhoods, local coffee shops, the never-ending strange charms of condo living. He was easy to be around, funny, present, the kind of guy who made it easy to forget how long you'd been alone. But while Jace tightened her cabinet hinges, his phone, silenced and face down, buzzed steadily on the counter beside him. Because Jace wasn't just a handyman. He was actually Jason Porter, a serial romance scammer known for slipping into women's lives, winning their trust, and then disappearing with more than just their hearts. Heather hadn't heard about him yet, but she would. In that moment, she had no idea how much damage he could do, or how close she already was to becoming his next target. I'm Claire Murphy, and this is True Crime Conversations, a podcast exploring the world's most notorious crimes by speaking to the people who know the most about them. Jason Porter scammed dozens, potentially hundreds of women across Canada over more than a decade, using romance scams as his primary method. He targeted women mostly through dating apps like Plenty of Fish, eHarmony, Match.com and Bumble, often using fake names like Jace, Don, Donato and Mike. At the peak of his romance scam campaign, he had hundreds of women on the hook. And when Heather unknowingly stumbled into the midst of this complex ring of broken hearts waiting to happen, she would stop dead in her tracks, seeing again and again words that she thought meant only for her, repeated over and over and over again, each unsuspecting victim falling for the exact same charm that she had. While many women do not report being scammed by someone who gets to them via dating apps, Heather said, "Damn the shame. I'm taking this guy down even if it's the last thing I do." But getting there would not be easy. And Jace still had some tactics left up his sleeve to try and once again get away with innocent women's money while breaking their trust. Heather stars in the Amazon Prime documentary Who the F is Jason Porter? And talks to us now about the man she thought she loved, the man who she would help put behind bars. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today. After watching RomCon, I think the overarching feeling we've gotten from seeing you talk about your experience of being targeted by a romance scammer is like, you are such a boss lady. Like, you've been through the actual worst and used it as fuel for the fire. Like, do you feel after your experience of not only what you went through with Jason Porter, but also filming this documentary, do you feel stronger on the other side of your experience?
That's a good question. I do. After making the documentary and going through the criminal justice system, I really feel like I took one of the worst things that has ever happened to me in my life. Well, actually, no, let me rephrase that. This meeting Jace at the beginning was great, but when I learned the truth, that's probably the worst thing in terms of something being unfair. And by reclaiming it, it's given me my power back. You know, nobody wants to wake up and be a victim. So if you can take that victimhood and make it victorious, it's a good thing.
Well, let's go back to when you did first meet Jace, because the way you describe it, in the documentary Rom-Con is like every woman's fantasy. It's like romances that we read in books. Like, can you explain to us how he like initially grabbed your attention and kept hold?
Yes, it was like a Hollywood meet cute. There I open the door and there's this super cute guy. His predecessor was this chubby Eastern European guy named Oleg or Olaf. And so I wasn't expecting to open the door and just see such a cutie. And Jace, I guess I could still say it in the present. He was so charming and so flirtatious, and not knowing who he was, and that's all part of his game. It's easy to get hooked in, to get pulled into that. Because I've never had, from the first day we met to when we went on our first date, it was about a 2.5 week lag. And I have every single text message he has ever sent to me. And the in between, that was some of the spiciest, most flirtatious texts we've ever sent one another back. And I thought it was me and I was so special. But then learning that that's what he said to Tiffany, and that's what he said to Leslie, and that's what he has on his online chats. It's his Bible, I guess. It's his, his playlist in a way. And he obviously, like, it works. It worked. I was googly-eyed. I was on cloud nine for weeks and months and even years with him.
I think that's what really felt like a knife to the gut when watching this all unfold, was when they do put up the comparisons between what he was saying to you and what he was saying to others, which really matched almost word for word. But then the story you tell about the night of your first date when he first kisses you is also the same story shared by the other women. And that feels like such an intimate and special moment. Can you just talk me through first your first kiss with him, and then how it feels to know that exact same scenario has played out for, not even knowing how many other women?
So, yeah, we had gone out for dinner and it was summer. So he came on his motorcycle and we walked to a restaurant and walked home. And he had left, the motorcycle helmet and the infamous backpack up in my place. And so we went up, and I just remember I actually had Baxi, the dog that's in the documentary. I was holding him and we were sort of shuffling in the doorway. And it was one of those is he going to kiss me? Should I kiss him? And I don't know what came over in me, but I leaned in and just kind of went. And that's when he took Baxter, plopped him on the ground, dropped his helmet, dropped his backpack, and literally pushed me up against the wall. And when I say it left me breathless and it left me weak in the knee, I have never been kissed like that. When I heard Tiffany's story, which was, I think, around the same time as my first kiss, I was floored. It is wild that he did the same thing to me, to her, to who knows how many other women. For so many years, I thought I was so special, and that he made me feel special, because every day in, day out, I would hear, "You're the love of my life. I love you." He would call me all the time throughout the day, and it would always be, "Okay, I love you, bye. I love you, bye. I love you, bye." When you're told, "I love you, I love you, I love you," you feel very special. So to hear that my whole love story is just a move he has that he's perfected, it's pretty gut-wrenching. But, to learn that I really wasn't special sucked. I'm not going to lie. Like, it really was awful. But to also realize that any of the problems in the relationship weren't me was also really kind of liberating. I remember one day after learning the truth, I called my mom and I was kind of laughing, crying. I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't mess this up. Like, it wasn't me. It was him." So from that perspective, it wasn't so bad. But, to be honest, it took me a long time just to make sense of it and to make peace with it. And there's still some days where I'll say it's like impossible to make sense of something so senseless.
I think what people want to understand the most out of this, and especially for people who've been caught out before, is where were you? Because you met him in 2018. So what was the 2018 version of Heather looking like? Because from what I can gather, she was pretty happy being solo and living life and being successful and wasn't looking for a relationship at that point in time. And in fact, you'd been single for quite a while by that stage. So what made you the perfect victim for Jason Porter? Like, what did he see in you that made you a good target?
I think what made me a good target for him was probably that I coupled his, like, it's like chess, right? Like for every move he did, I would meet him there in the beginning, right? Like, so if he flirted, I flirted back. Cause I thought at first it was just a game until it started getting serious. But once we became physical and intimate, I was gone because there were so many of those like feel good hormones raging through my body that I couldn't even see straight. So, and like I say in the documentary, like all of a sudden, like the little things in life, he just had this way of making everything so much fun, whether it was going on the motorcycle or going to the grocery store or just now all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I have somebody just to, make dinner and sit on the couch with. Like it was a nice, welcome change from being solo Heather. And now I all of a sudden had somebody I could talk to about my day and talk to about work. Like I had been in and out of a relationship before I met him, and I had this, like a comfort blanket kind of friend, not really. I don't like the term friends with benefits, but I did have somebody in my life that while the physical intimacy with that person was gone, I still had him as a friend. Yeah, Jace just, I don't know. He just, I'd never felt like that before. I had never had somebody also so quickly and openly and brazenly declare their love for me and tell me how incredible I was. Like it's messes with your brain, but it also, not knowing what he was doing, it felt incredible. Why wouldn't I want to see where this went? I remember probably like a month after meeting him, walking down the street, and I ran into a friend I hadn't seen in a while. And she was like, "Oh my God, you're glowing." I'm like, "I'm in love. I'm in love." Like I owned being in love like a new badge. I was just like, you got to fall in love. It's the best thing ever because it felt incredible. And it's sad that it really wasn't real. But in the moment, in not knowing, it was great.
What did he create of himself? Because he span a lot of stories that created this vision of who Jace Peretti, as he called himself then, not Jason Porter. Like, what was he telling you about himself? And if you could explain too how that didn't just reel you in, but also your friends and family to a point too, because he was creating this version of a human that didn't exist, which was quite appealing to everybody.
I think with Jace, I'd like to think that when he was in prison as Jason Porter, he probably had a lot of time to sit around and think. And I think he crafted up these tall tales. So when he first got out of federal prison, he changed his name from Jason Porter to Jace Peretti. And then by the time I met him, Peretti had morphed into Peretti. And when I met him that day, that first day at my condo, and he right away told me he'd gone to the University of Waterloo and he was really a software engineer, but because of what he was navigating with the family court system, he was just taking a break from corporate world. So when he would share his tall tales of living in China and living in Japan and working at this job, being in my mid to late 40s, I have a lot of that back then. Like I have a lot of successful friends. I was successful. I am successful. Like So they were believable stories. So, for him to say, oh, I worked at this company and I lived in China. Well, of course you did. Why wouldn't you? I have been, I think like most people, like I meet people and I don't think right off the bat, oh, he's lying. They're not, you take people at their word, at their face value. So of course I believed him that he had all these great stories. I mean, even, the way he wooed my mom was, both my parents are really into history and the stories of both his Italian grandparents fighting for the Allies in World War II. Literally, one of the stories that he told us, it's exactly the same as The Great Escape, that famous movie. And
Wow.
well,
Okay.
yeah. And my mom even said that one night at dinner. She's like, sounds like The Great Escape. He's like, it is like The Great Escape. That was my grandfather. They based that on him and all those other people. We're like, oh, wow. I mean, it's now that we know who he is, it's completely far-fetched and a lie. But at the time, we were just like, wow. Like he just, they say sometimes there's like nuggets of truth in the lies, but most of his stories, I think they're from books, movies, who knows, but it's pretty much all lies.
I mean, I know you said he probably had some time in prison to really think about things and spin these stories in his own mind, but I imagine like a young man doesn't just wake up one day and he's really great at making women believe that he's this amazing, wonderful boyfriend material. Like, any idea where he might have learnt this behavior? Or is there any idea from like his family? Have they ever spoken about maybe what he was like when he was a younger man? Do you have any concept of where he would have learnt this behavior?
I've never spoken to anyone in his family. I would love to.
Even though you're together for quite a few years, right?
Yeah. Oh, that definitely. I mean, but that was also like now that's a glaring red flag that I've never met his family. But he had, when I would say, like, what's up with your brother? Why can't we meet? Let's go meet your brother. He had a whole story as to why we weren't, why him and his brother were estranged right now. And he had this way of like turning it around. So then you just felt so bad for kind of stirring the pot and making him feel bad, but that's what gaslighting is. But I didn't know that at the time. I have no idea because he does have a brother whom I've never met, but I've learned enough about him since to know like his brother is a normal person with a wife and kids. Like, how can a family have one child who's so mendacious and one who's normal? I mean, I don't know. I, I'd love to one day learn the truths to all his backstory, but his parents are dead. I actually, through our whole relationship, was under the impression that his biological father was still alive because he used to talk about his dad as if he were still alive. But any parental figure in his life is gone. And that's the other question with all this. Are these psychopaths born this way or is it a learned behavior? I don't know.
You said like that was an obvious red flag, and the beauty of hindsight is you can probably identify a shit ton of red flags now looking back. But were any of your friends or family noticing suspicious behaviors during the start of your relationship? Did anyone ever say to you, oh, maybe this guy's not quite right?
No. I mean, in the documentary, my good friend Kristen shares how, she would talk to him at length about she would grill him on China because she goes to China, or she used to, a lot. And for, as she says, for a guy who lived in China for 2 years to know no Mandarin and know really nothing, to her it was suspicious. But, nobody told me because I think I was just so happy. Like I was really happy. And I don't think anyone wanted to burst my bubble. So they just sort of kept their thoughts to themselves. Had they shared this with me, I would like to think I would have listened, but it's hard to say, right? Because, with Kristen, he made it very clear how he felt about her. Like he would say things like, I don't think she's a good friend for you. She's not a healthy person. So he would flip it around. So I would start to question my friendship. She's one of the most loyal people in the world. Like, we're still very, very close to this day. I adore her. You know, it's crazy to think that that's what they do. They weaponize everything. Love, friends, family. They isolate. Like, I mean, it's one of their tactics. They do try to isolate you. And in our case, the pandemic fed perfectly into it, and I mean, it's crazy to me. Like, there's times where I've wondered, did he have some insight into what was happening with the world before the rest of us? Because we were, that whole Italy trip, we were supposed to have gone to Italy early March, like 2 weeks before the world shut down. But about a month before we were supposed to go, he came home one day and he was like, oh my God, the family court is now happening when we're supposed to go to Italy. So it's all just, I don't know, like, it's just to this day all a bit of a mystery. But yeah, I don't know. Was he born that way? I don't know. Maybe.
Up next, Heather describes what life was like once she and Jason moved in together and how more cracks in his story started to show. When the pandemic hit, you move in together, and so you're spending like really long periods of time to start with in a small apartment together, and then you move into a bigger property further out of the city. But I imagine it would have been more difficult for him to cover up, because it's not like he stopped being a scammer for other women during the pandemic. In fact, it continued on just as it did beforehand, but he's not as free to physically spend time with other women. But it would have been harder for him to cover his tracks while you are in a small space with him at all times. Like, did you ever see anything that made you wonder or think, or was he really just that good at keeping things separate? Because he was doing so many things at once, which is what I think really surprised me, that he is able to keep so many women on the hook, manipulating so many, taking things from them, like physical items, but also, money and lots of other things. Like, how is he managing all of that whilst also existing in a pandemic state with you?
So even like before the pandemic, I remember it would have been probably in the first 6 months of our relationship, with his backstory being that he had worked in China. He came home and he's like, oh, I've picked up a small contracting gig for that company, but because of the time change, I'm going to have to like stay up late. I'm like, okay. So I would go to bed at a normal time and he would stay up half the night. So I think that's when he would be engaging with a lot of these, he probably then hit the apps, but who's kidding who? Like, he's addicted to his phone. Probably when he went to the bathroom, he would have his phone and be on the apps texting people. But, when we hit lockdown, within probably 2 weeks of the lockdown or less, he started looking for a moonlighting job, as he called it. And he was able to, because I don't know what it was like in Australia, but in Canada, certain things were deemed essential services. And I think construction, I believe, must have fallen into that, because he was able to get a moonlighting cash paying job working, renovating a nightclub. Just next door to Toronto is a smaller city called Mississauga. So he was going out to Mississauga. So that gave him also a lot of freedom to claim he was, working late or doing this or doing that and go on dates. And there was one weekend in there that I remember, I mean, this isn't in the documentary, so I'm probably not supposed to talk about it, but the guys who hired him for the nightclub, apparently they were having a guys' weekend to go and race sports cars and motorcycles at a track east of the city. And I was like, go have fun. Why not? It's a guys' weekend. But it wasn't a guys' weekend, because after the article came out, a woman emailed me and it was confirmed that that guys' weekend he was actually with another woman. So I think, to answer your question, the pandemic actually gave him more power, more, if anything, my guard would be even more down because I'm locked up and what am I going to do? So I never questioned what he was doing. I never in a million years thought he was cheating on me.
Yeah, is it cheating if he was never really in that relationship in the first place? Maybe not. After the pandemic, you're spending a bit of time out on your parents' farm, and one day your mum notices that a lot of her jewellery is missing. Stuff that had been in a safe that was unlocked from her rooms. In the beginning, it's very much like no one is even considering that Jace might have taken these things. And in fact, your mum talks in the documentary about confronting the cleaner about it, who told her that Jace had taken them, and she still couldn't believe that that was the case. When you heard that from your mum, what the cleaner had told you, did any part of you at any stage start to consider that maybe it was him, or were you so happy and stable in that relationship that you thought that there was no way that could potentially be what happened?
My mom never told me about confronting the cleaning lady. When it was happening. I learned about it after the fact that the cleaning lady had quit. We were all surprised when I got into the computer and started seeing, emails for like this ring, that bracelet. Like it was, I could not believe what I was seeing. I think because, again, he was with my mom's stuff, like none of us wear all our jewelry all the time, right? So I don't think she noticed it was happening until one day she noticed it.
So this could have been going on for months.
I do know it was going on for months and months because of some of the evidence I found. It was dated as such, right? The first thing that went missing actually was in the fall of 2019. That's how long it's going on for. And yeah, I think Jace probably figured out like where the things were kept and, where like that little safe was. And when we would go for a visit or he would, go up on his own and my mom would be like, here's the key, here's the alarm code, let yourself in, make yourself a coffee because she trusted him. I think it was so easy. He was like a kid in a candy store. He couldn't help himself. He would just go and take one thing and then he could sell it and he'd have a bit of money. And then he would take another thing and sell it. So it wasn't until like that one day that they really went through all the bags and they were like, oh my God. And when we still didn't know it was Jace until like a couple months later after all that happened, like it was shocking. It was shocking. I didn't have the heart to actually tell my parents it was Jace. I made my sister do it because I was so upset. I was devastated. And my sister had come to my house in Aurora with her boyfriend. And I was like, Jenny, you have to tell her. I can't. I didn't have the heart. I was so ashamed. I brought the monster into our home.
That must be so hard to still come to terms with. I can see during the documentary how emotionally difficult it is for you to think about that.
Mm-hmm. It really, really is. And there's the part in the documentary where my mom says when she realized both her wedding bands were gone, it's like part of her marriage, the memories of her marriage are gone. And now, especially with my dad not being here, that's the worst thing. Like when I said earlier, learning that my life with Jace was a lie, that was like a really awful, awful thing. But it's losing your parent is like such a different kind of pain. I mean, I would take the pain of what I discovered with Jace over and over again if it meant my dad were still here. And when we finally were going through the court and he, it said he did eventually, after 3 years and 3 months, he pled guilty. We got to read victim impact statements and both of us would say it's not the monetary value of what he stole. It's the memories. Like my mom's never going to get that back. None of us are. There's nothing for her that, every time my dad would give her something, it was a representation of an anniversary or a birthday or a trip, like to commemorate that memory. And now that's all gone, and there's nothing to pass on to my sister or myself or my niece. Like there's no heirlooms anymore. He Jace wiped that out. Like, and I remember I was at a movie with my parents, and one of the preview ads was for Tiffany, and my mom like gasped, like, "That's my ring." And I wanted to just die. Like it was awful. No amount of time in jail will make that better, So and even though he has to pay my mom restitution when he eventually gets out, which good luck. I don't know how he'll do
Mhm.
that. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't even think she would keep the money. I think she'd give it to charity because it doesn't, I don't know. It's something my therapist and I talk about this a lot. It's that radical acceptance. You, you don't have to like it, but you have to accept that it happened.
After the break, Heather talks about logging into Jason's email and seeing endless conversations with other women on dating apps. Can you take us into your mind the day that you figure out his password to his Gmail account and you start to see exactly what he's been up to? Like, what is happening in your brain when you first start to see all the conversations with all these women? A lot of it sounds very familiar, and you can see the sheer volume of conversations he's having on incredible amounts of dating apps and sites. And like, take us into your mind then when you're just discovering what has actually been happening in your relationship.
The first thing I did when I got in the computer and I started seeing all this, I called him. My first instinct, I picked up the phone and I called him because I was like, what? It made no sense to me. And although, you know, things had been a little rocky, I was still very much committed to my relationship with him and my life with him. And I was like, oh my God. And he didn't answer. So then I was left to my own devices for hours. And I realized I took pretty crappy screenshots. I've since mastered it. But it was almost like that feeling when your stomach comes up in your throat, because and it's like the room kind of started spinning. And I think maybe it was shock. That's what like a low grade shock must feel like, because I it, I was like flabbergasted, like I am right now trying to describe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing at all. Like it blew my mind. It's like I feel like I got split in half, because there was part of me that's like, this is insane. And oh my God, I'm in love with this person. Like, how it was just black and white. There was no gray in that moment. And it was so awful. It was, I didn't want to believe it. And I think I say it in the documentary too. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't believe when I got into one of the dating apps, like his actual profile. It's not like he was talking to two or three women. It was hundreds of every age, every ethnicity, like, and always like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. Hey, beautiful. And I'm like, oh my God, that I would walk through our house in Aurora and he'd be like, hey, beautiful, hey, beautiful, hey, beautiful. In that moment too, it's like everything that I thought to be like the kiss, like everything that I thought to be special and true about my relationship was just a line and a lie. I don't know. Would it be easier if I had just gotten in the computer and saw he was cheating with one person? That would really hurt and that would suck, but it would be like, oh, okay. But it's hundreds of people that he's talking to. Like he's a predator. And then to, go down my rabbit hole and realize Jace Peretti, aka Parati, is actually Jason Porter, the original online Romeo, was shocking. Shocking.
I think what's so incredible about this documentary, Romcon, is that there's actual footage of you from this period when you are discovering. And you can see the sheer amount of emotions that you are experiencing in that moment. I mean, you are terrified, you are angry, you're upset, like all the gamut of emotions. And you say police do get involved, and it seems like they're pretty dismissive of the things that you're telling them initially. And as you said, you had to leave your house, even though, you know, he was the one who had, you know, was a convicted criminal, and which you just figured out, and that he was still committing crimes. And then it seems like, I don't know, this rod of steel grows in your spine, and you sit down and are like, no, I'm not going to let this man get away with what he's done, not just to me, but to all these other women. What do you think was happening to you in that moment? Because women, especially who are caught out by romance scammers, notoriously feel really shameful about it and very embarrassed. And that is completely understandable. It is, you've not just taken advantage of financially, you're taking advantage of someone emotionally, which I think is sometimes harder to recover from than a financial knock. What do you think it was about you in that moment that you were like, hell no, this guy's going to pay?
I think I very much became like a dog with a bone. Like I wasn't going to let this go. I wanted answers. I would still love to be able to talk to the brother and like find out like what went wrong in your childhoods that he turned out this way. But I think it's when the police were just so dismissive with me that it gave me even more purpose to keep going. Like I think in a way, after the article came out, I just was tunnel visioned to keep going and keep learning. And in a way, he made it easy because he just kept the criminal justice thing rolling along, which gave me even more ammo and anger to just get to the bottom of it. Like I just wanted justice served for what he did to us, but I equally wanted to try and expose him so he couldn't do this to anyone else. And it's incredible how many people have reached out to me to say, like, I know him. Like, he never stopped. Now he's finally stopped because he's finally in jail. But if I were 20 years younger and had gone through this, I probably would have just remained in the shame and licked my wounds and been like, oh, that sucked. But in the middle of all this, I turned 50 and I couldn't have peace with myself if I just let it go. I had to get the answers. And to be honest, I still don't have all the answers. There's still quite a few pieces of the puzzle missing. I hope with the documentary that perhaps it might bring more people forward who were affected by him. But somewhere along this journey too, by reclaiming my power and taking charge of the storyline and working on the documentary and having so many incredible people want to bring my story to light, it's given me even more confidence that I know I'm doing the right thing.
Hey, you touch on something there. It's incredible because while the court system was very slowly grinding away with this case, as you mentioned, it took 3 years or more, like he was still on the dating apps when this was happening. Like people you know and who were keeping an eye on things and researching, and yourself were finding him still putting profiles up on these dating apps whilst he was going through criminal charges. Like that seems wild to me. Like if you are facing a jail term and yet you're still doing the crime.
But isn't that what makes him like a psychopath?
Mm.
Because he doesn't have, this guy has no remorse. He has no empathy. He has no conscience. I don't think I can't speak for him, but from what I've observed, it's like on one hand, he's going through criminal court, and then he's probably going on a date that very night with somebody. It's like to him, they're two. It's, on our first date, he talked to me about how he puts everything in boxes. And I know men more than women, they can compartmentalize their emotions a bit better. So I chalked it up to some of his behavior through our relationship. I was just like, oh, he's compartmentalizing. But when the truth came to light, I was like, oh my God, it's like he has, this memory in this box and this one in this box, or this current situation is this box and this one's this box. And he just pulls it out and opens it when he needs it. I don't think you said something else earlier, and it was interesting with Jace. Jace rarely drank. If we went out for dinner, he might have one drink, whereas I love wine. Like I could, I'm not going to drink a whole bottle. And now I realized when the truth came to light, I think he would do that on purpose too, because, there's that saying, loose lips sinks ships.
So he had to keep his ducks in a row.
Exactly. And so, all of the other women in the documentary, all of our stories are the same, but with like a little bit of, he might have told this woman, I was wearing a blue sweater and with me it was a green sweater. Like there's little differences, but overall it's the same sort of story. And I think it must be exhausting being him. Like how many people has he, like you'd have to think, like, who have I told this to? Who have I told that to? So he has to keep it pretty tight. Like it's crazy. He's crazy.
Well, I think that is really evident when you're going through the court proceedings and there's that moment where you see the people coming out a bit too quickly and you're like, hang on, what's happened? And then you find out that there's some allegations of tampering because flyers were left on cars, allegedly by yourself, warning people about him. But then it turns out like that's another lie that he's telling in court.
Yeah. Yeah. He showed up in court and lied to a superior court judge, a crown attorney, his own attorney. It's great. Yeah. I think I say in the documentary, during lockdown, we watched, I think, almost every Law and Order.
Yeah.
Like I used to joke, I'm like, I broke Netflix. Like I broke the internet TV because we watched so many shows. But somehow he got the idea, between the flyers didn't come that day. Like everybody left court that day. And then it was 2 days later when court resumed that the flyers mysteriously were found. And so that little interlude gave him time to plot and scheme and be like, how can I get out of this? It was his Hail Mary because and it's crazy if you think about it. Somebody would actually go that far to do it. But I mean, people do all kinds of crazy things.
How do you feel about his sentence? Because he was sentenced to 2 years in prison, 3 years probation. And then, as you mentioned, he does have some caveats, like he does have to pay your mum restitution for the stolen jewelry. And he also has to report to his probation officer every time he's in a new romantic relationship, which is going to be interesting to see how that's tracked after he gets out of prison. But how do you feel about that sentence? Because I guess from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem like a lot considering the amount of damage he did to so many people.
I agree. And in fact, the judge gave more time than the Crown was asking for, because I guess in Canada, I don't know what it's like in Australia, although we all come from British law, like our courts follow that system. But apparently in Canada, it's miraculous that he even got the time he did when you look at if you're looking at just what was stolen. People don't go to jail for that long for stealing, things.
Well, that's the thing too, because he's charged with theft, but not really about all the other stuff.
Because we didn't have all the evidence. And when he erased the computer that night after the police left, a lot of stuff that I had screenshotted but had not retrieved off the computer got erased. Yes. So I think it was, in the end, it was 2 counts of theft over 5,000 and 1 count of crime over 5,000, which is great because again, in Canada, there's like theft and crime under 5,000 is like one set of charges, and then anything above 5,000 becomes another. But I mean, the truth is, like I said, he still has 3 other outstanding criminal cases in 3 different areas, one being Leslie's watch, the other being these new charges. And there's something else that happened in 2022 that I still don't even know what that's about. It has nothing to do with me. So he still has more charges, which I hope it adds more time on, because also the way it works in Canada is, it's crazy that I know this now, but he got 2 years less one day. You go to provincial jail. Anything over 2 years, you go to federal prison. Either way, neither are good. Like, I don't think you want to be in either of those institutions, but I would love to see more time thrown at him for these other crimes that he's done. But I also think, I heard somewhere when these guys like him go to prison, jail, it's like college for criminals. And he's going to meet other scammers and other people while he's locked up. And he'll maybe come out with some new ideas, some new MO. Who knows? I don't know how effective the whole system is. Like, I don't know if people like him ever get fully rehabilitated. Yes, he deserves to be locked up, and I'm very glad he is. And I do feel like some justice was served, but it wasn't. I was hoping he would get like at least 10 years and come out an old man, but that didn't happen.
How do you now start to rebuild and recover and step away from this? Because I'm presuming you can't fully ever step away from it with the sheer number of people who are attached to Jason Porter and you really being the face of his crimes. Now, I guess you're contacted by I don't know how many people on the regular who have been impacted by him. But like, can you step away from it now? Can you recover? And do you ever have another romantic relationship for as long as you live? Like, how do you move on from this?
Well, I am dating and I'm very happy.
Nice.
Been seeing a lovely, lovely man, but it's been very slow because it has been hard. It's really interesting. I talked to Leslie a lot about him and dating because she's gone through it too. And it takes time to, it's some days in the relationship, it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, and it's not him, it's me. And I fully own it, and he gets it. And thank God he's so loving and patient and sees what I've gone through. And he just wants to, be supportive and make my life better. But it takes time, I'm glad it's been over 3 years, right? So I've given myself a lot of time to process. But to answer the first part of the question, I still find myself going on the court dockets, seeing when is he up next in court, like what's going on. I don't know if I'd love to be able to say I've put it all behind me, but as long as there's still the outstanding matters, I'm still kind of connected to it, especially with the obstruction of justice charges with the flyer, because I will be a witness at that trial if it goes to trial. But I think anyone who's ever been in my shoes or sadly might end up in my shoes, you just have to give yourself a lot of compassion. I'm very lucky. I have I have the most amazing family and such a strong network of friends. And I've done a lot of therapy. I walk my dog all the time because when I just have to clear my head, I'll go for a walk. But I really this has definitely reprioritized things for me. What once seemed so important isn't. And for me, self-care and health are like first and foremost. But yeah, I don't know. I really, like I said earlier too, I do hope it would be really cool if more victims can come forward. And imagine if more charges could get laid against him. And he did spend a long, long time in jail. Like, that would be amazing. So we'll see. Life is just a work in progress, right? Like one day at a time.
Thank you to Heather for helping us tell her story. True Crime Conversations is a podcast hosted by me, Claire Murphy, and produced by Tali Blackman, with audio designed by Jacob Round. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another True Crime Conversation.